I missed some of the signs that I was perhaps being dragged down. My heart went into fibrillation. And as a fit bloke who cycles and gyms pretty every day, that was a bit weird. And I said to myself and to my family, this is never going to happen again.
Welcome back to the Mentl Space, and we're here in the Leaders Lounge at Expo City, which is quite appropriate because today we're talking to a leader who truly believes in the importance of mental health, both within our personal lives, but also in the professional setting, and how important it is to helping workplaces thrive. Please welcome to the Mentl Space podcast, Mr. David Stockton, the CEO of Dulsco Group. How are you today, David?
Very well, Scott. Very well indeed. Thank you very much for inviting me on.
You're very welcome. We always start the podcast with one question, which is, what does mental health mean to you?
I think for me personally, it's the positivity of what I do in my life. If I've got my mental health space correct, then I think everything I do, whether it's professional, personal, will work. Empathy is a given in terms of my own character. But I do think that, having the right neutrons firing in my head makes me better, makes me more positive. And it's managing, all of those together to ensure that I can perform as best as I can, both professionally and personally.
So we're going to focus, if we can, on leadership and the importance of mental health being communicated as a priority by leadership. Delighted that you yourself entered the Mentl Awards in 2024 and were named as the Leader of the Year because obviously it's such a priority for you. Why is mental health inside your organization, inside Dulsco Group, such an important priority for you?
Look, I think we're this is home for thousands of people, and we're 23,000 and growing people, and we're all away
23,000. That's a lot of people to be responsible for.
It is, and I think we're all responsible and accountable for each other as well as ourselves. But I think mental health is a priority because we are away from our natural habitat. This is home, but we are away from our natural habitat. And I think the priority, because of personal issues that I went through, that I probably took a long time to recognise, but more so around personal interactions I've had with friends, with family, where I've seen their health being affected by issues. And I think from my own perspective, ensuring that we, again, have a high-performing organisation can only happen if everybody feels good about what they're doing and about themselves.
You mentioned your personal experience. If you're able, can you share with us how that shaped your... Because I've asked you today what mental health looks like to you today, but it feels like that wasn't always the case with you. So what has your journey been, and how's that shaped your view as a leader?
Look, I think it's shaped me massively in terms of what happened. I went through in 2019. I missed some of the signs that I was perhaps being dragged down through circumstances caused by others that I thought I could change. My natural tenacity is I can change those people. I can make them better people, when in fact that wasn't going to happen. And I would do things differently today. But the outcome of that is that I'm far more aware of when things do build up, what the relievers are, what those pain points are. As leaders, we tend to act as an umbrella. When it rains, it rains and it flows off. And the idea is not to have that flowing down through the organization or to family or to friends. I've been fortunate to work with people when mental health wasn't discussed. If it was discussed, there's a problem, you need to take time off and you need to probably not come back. Today is very, very different. And I want everybody to feel that it's safe and encourage people to actually speak out and speak up if there are problems and how perhaps we can help support them rather than just solve them. Some of the action-orientated things within the workplace we can potentially solve. The personal things we can't, but we can be a good ear. And I think it's very easy to try and step into the role of psychologist or psychiatrist with having no qualifications and no understanding. So bring in professionals to help to do that.
You talk about being the umbrella, and let's just talk about a leader's perspective for a bit, because as you say, you don't want it to trickle down into the organisation or family and friends. But that also can be quite hard and quite lonely to be that shield, to be that umbrella. How do, and you've talked about your past experience, how do you guard against I see so many CEOs who are isolated. It is that tough at the top. And we know that mental health impacts CEOs as much, if not more so, than if the general populace of the workforce. So from that leadership perspective, how do you maintain the umbrella without burning out yourself?
I think the check and balance is really important, and it's quite interesting. I remember sitting in Expo City during the pre-launch phase with my peers that were all involved in the build-up to delivery of Expo, pre the delay, and actually raising this very subject amongst 20 other CEOs. And it was almost like a light bulb had gone off saying, I feel exactly the same. We all, like it or not, suffer sometimes with imposter syndrome. It's very easy. We're on that hamster wheel where we're running, and we're ensuring that we deliver for everybody else, deliver for your business, for your shareholders, etc., and trying to deliver for yourself. But actually recognizing sometimes you don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
You don't have all the solutions. And ensuring that you've got the right team around you, the right people around you, both professionally and personally, to ensure that you're performing at your very, very best. And I think one of the things that I've certainly recognized is being able to share potential issues before they come up with peers in a non-competitive way, because naturally when you lead functions, you lead businesses, you are naturally competitive because you want to be successful, not necessarily for the glory of the stripes, as I call it, but actually you like to win, whether you're a sporting person or you want to have the best garden. It doesn't matter. You want to be able to do that. So ensuring that you've got a valve to be able to say, hey, Scott, I'm facing this sort of stuff. Are you feeling the same things? Are you seeing the same things? I think is really important with that network of umbrellas.
How do you break down that stigma then to have that kind of open and vulnerable conversations? I see so many CEOs who try to be that island, try to be that individual that knows everything, because to admit that they don't know something about a certain topic or situation is to admit weakness, let alone talk about the fact that they're struggling with their mental health or things are becoming a bit too much for them. How do we get past that stigma at a leadership level?
I think there's, you raise a really good point, but I do think there's, there's a narrative and there's a way of actually bringing the subject into dialogue.
Yeah.
You hope it doesn't have to be because there's a particular issue, but actually being open and transparent with your team, whether that's direct reports, in the wider space, using mental health days, using the Mentl awards, when, as you mentioned, we were successful, to be able to use that as a platform to talk and actually share some information. And I find that people gravitate to that because they see a different side of you, whether you're task focused, whether you're outcome focused, whether you're just literally creating rah-rah to hyper growth. There's also got to be a human factor to everything we do.
Yeah.
And I think that empathy with what other people are going through and also sharing what perhaps you've been through or you're experiencing goes a very long way. Clearly, there are some things you won't touch on, cultural sensitivities, etc. But I think you've got to be very, very aware of sharing the openness, because that buys spirit.
How have you seen that play out? You and since I've met you, we always have very open conversations. You embrace vulnerability. You talk about the fact that you've had your own personal, your lived experience of mental health. How does that translate into your organization when you're talking to your teams, from both whether it be the C-suite or whether it be the security guard when you're walking through the door? Because, culture might be, strategy might be, envisioned at the top, but it's literally delivered. The culture of the organization starts from the security guard as people walk through the door, in the morning. So how have you found your authenticity or your willingness to share sort of encouraged other people within the organization to open up?
No, I think nobody's born into a leadership role, whether you're a supervisor, a manager, a senior manager, a leader, director, whatever it is. You come through a form of ranks. How much training is there depends on the organization you're working for and when you get to to various points and what carries on with you through coaching or other areas. I think having a true understanding of what it's like to do roles, whether that's back to floor operations, whether that's an open day, to be able to understand what's actually happening, but you actually see things from different angles. It's very easy to sit in the center and just dictate. I think our roles in any leadership, in any supervisory role, is to do a lot of receiving, because a lot of transmitting goes on.
Yeah.
And transmitting can be interpreted in many, many ways.
Yeah.
So it's really important to receive information, to process that information, and to be able to work with what you've got with people, to understand, what motivates them, what causes them problems, pain relievers, how can you deal with that? And also just having a conversation that perhaps goes beyond work. So what's going on? How's your family back home?
What's in your life?
What are you doing?
Yeah.
And that way you start to tease out many, many different things. And I think that's critical for me to have a better understanding. I'll never do it with 23,000 people, but you start the ripple effect of layer by layer by layer.
It's almost like trickle-down economics, but with mental health and empathy.
Absolutely.
How have you seen things change? Because look, I've held leadership positions, and I remember when I first came into leadership, and I'm from a journalism background. There is zero training on how to be a leader. You're promoted because you're good at a process. I was good at knowing what a good story was, how to put a newspaper together. I was a terrible leader of people, and I hid away from that. I would focus on technology, or it took me a long, long time to recognize that actually my job was simply to help the players on the field of play score the goals. It was not for me to control everything. And I was a terrible leader when I first started. It took me a long time. Are you seeing that change where, leaders are being promoted because they can lead people as opposed to they understand the process and that's all they can do?
I would say 100%.
Yeah.
And genuinely, I live by the mantra all the way through, was I treat people how I want to be treated myself.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be the ranter. You don't have to be the, using terminology that's not appropriate anymore. I think simple words like disappointment, have you really thought about that, has a massive impact. As parents, we tend to use those at an early age. We still use them when the kids are grown up and, left home. But I think in the workplace, it's the same thing. I do believe there's been a transformation about developing, people who've got talent and skills that are trainable, rather than you've got, whatever, names, letters that have all been able to achieve because you've studied incredibly well. Some people don't take on that information, but some people can learn incredibly well because they love what they do. And I would say that you can't teach empathy, you can't teach respect. You're not born with it. You learn it, and you can show people a way of doing it. And only then can you start to develop that further as people move through organizations. And certainly from what I see within organizations I've worked in, people are very talented at what they do, but they've also got to bring the team with them. The moment you lose the dressing room, you've lost everything.
Absolutely. I mean, that is something that sports have understood perhaps much earlier than the business community, that actually the manager needs to create the environment in which the striker feels confident every time he hits the ball, he's going to score the goal. But I have some sympathy for leadership in that there is this case of, we're both of a certain generation. There is a case of the abused becomes the abuser. Their boss shouted at them. Their boss was toxic. They were never asked to be empathetic. This whole idea around, chief empathy officer or chief emotional officer. You look at reports right now, McKinsey saying that the top 10 skills that a leader needs these days, 6 of them are linked to emotional intelligence. And there is a generation of leadership inside boardrooms that are like, I would understand if they're terrified by the landscape today, because they're like, I was never told, I've never had to be vulnerable. I've never been taught this. The only way I've been taught is shout, 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 or I have to be the power monger in the business. I cannot, let up any kind of weakness. I can't show any weakness. How do we dismantle that? How do we break the cycle? Because there is a generation of leadership that are just not shown a better way of doing it.
I would build on what you're saying. I think it's still prevalent.
Yeah.
I think also it's followed through the different gens, because that's all they've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I think it's a challenge to be able to change someone. So you've got to navigate around it. when people take jobs now, we're certainly seeing the younger generations, they're looking at what's the culture.
Yeah.
You know, what's your
Very
culture
much so.
playbook within your organization? How they're asking you the questions of how do you deal with this should it happen? That's a paradigm shift from where it used to be.
Yeah.
I have a fundamental issue with door closing. You know, if your door is closed, it usually means don't enter.
Yeah.
That's not an open environment. Now, there will be times when the door has to be closed because you're having a challenging conversation or you're having
A business
you need to get your head
critical,
down.
sensitive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But most of the time, we've got to be aware of, you know, read the floor, read the shop floor. You think back to manufacturing, what happened on the shop floor would be positive or negative.
Yeah.
It's no different in the office space. Whether you're remote, you know, checking in, ensuring that the output is correct, but also what are we doing to build the skill set of the people that are with you? So I think there is a huge job still to be done. Will it ever change? I'm not sure it can. Some people definitely are for changing.
Yeah.
Some people are not. And it's then that navigation. How do you manage around that? But what they are doing is they're seeing other people, and perhaps there's another way of getting that vulnerability out. Maybe it's one-on-one. Maybe it's in a different format.
Yeah.
We've done amazing workshops through my career with outside providers where we've acted in roles that we don't have. So we act as the other person. Andy does it as a great scenario with it.
The legend is Andy Fieldhouse.
Exactly.
One of our partners for our workplace wellbeing consultancy, actually. He's a superstar.
And he created a brilliant, safe environment for us to play the roles of other people, other colleagues. And it was fantastic to see how playing that role, characters were very different to their normal characters. So you know it's there, but it's difficult to let it go. So it's just working with people and chipping away the whole time.
I often try to sound cleverer than I actually am by quoting Andy. But he often talks about this concept, again, from the sports world. And he talks about the San Francisco 49ers, who used to be was the most successful team in NFL for a long time. He talks about the coach there that used to talk about, if you look after the team, the score will take care of itself.
Yeah.
It feels like that's a principle that you're completely on board in. And in fact, if you focus on your talent and developing them so they can be the best themselves, because well-being and mental health isn't about not working hard and isn't about not having ambitious targets and isn't about succeeding. It's just about helping your team thrive so they can be their best self, and then you as an organization thrive. How have you seen that play out? You know, we often say it's good business to be a good business, but in reality, as a CEO sat in that chair, is it good business to be a good business?
100%. People gravitate to positivity. Yeah. People gravitate to success. You know, you don't always win, but you learn from why you didn't win.
Yeah.
What can you do to ensure next time? And sometimes winning isn't everything. Sometimes, you know, having a draw is okay when you're up against a real big talent. And when you're not successful, what do you need to do to be able to make yourself more successful? You know, I use a lot of sport in what I say and how I do things. I played golf last week. I happened to hit a birdie. The next hole, I hit an eagle. I was done. You know, there was 4 more holes to go. But what drove me on is how do I get the next one?
I dream of eagles. If you see me on a golf course. But it's still enjoyable. It's good for your mental health.
100%. But also I've seen the negative side of it. You know, you have a howler of a day and it does affect you, but you've got to dust yourself down and actually not set the bar too high and go, okay, that was once.
Yeah.
Can I do it twice in another game, another day?
Yeah.
And I think the same thing is what we do in the workplace is that if we've had a knockback, why? What do we do with it? What can we do even more? And when we are successful, celebrate it. You know, as Brits, we're quite reserved. I love the way the Americans celebrate many things. I love other cultures, how they celebrate many things.
Sure, I'm loving some of the ways the Americans are celebrating some things right now.
Not at the moment. No.
But this is not a politics podcast. A question in 2 parts. If we look at the ROI then, if we're adopting the language of the C-suite, the return on investment, what's the return on investment? Do you see a direct correlation between that cultural aspect and the hard results in the P&L, in the balance sheet? Again, coming back to it's good business to be a good business. But also, you know, and we often try to make the business case to C-suites around the region that it is indeed well worth their efforts embracing this. but also just from an emotional perspective, which sometimes we don't talk about. How does it feel to be the leader of a company that embraces culture? You know, how does it actually feel to be, you know, leading a company that feels good?
Really great question. And I'm very proud about, you know, what I call now the post-COVID years.
Yeah.
Made a decision early on before COVID really hit. And it's actually 5 years ago on the 2nd of March when my daughter's school wrote a letter to say that we're going to put IBs online. This thing's coming. We don't know what it's going to look like. And then we know the world all changed.
Yeah.
We've had a 3.5x growth since COVID. We're 3.5 times bigger than what we were. Our culture changed at the run up to COVID and during COVID, and made the decision not to get rid of people.
Yeah.
To actually stay with people. The shareholders supported us. And we were here from many businesses in this part of the world because lots of people left and lots of people went away.
Yeah.
And rightly or wrongly, we gave options, but we made the decision to keep people so we could pivot very quickly as things started to open up.
Yeah.
I think that was a seminal moment of cultural change because what I'd gone through in 19, we changed a number of people. It was change what you do or change the people.
Yeah.
And we changed the people.
Yeah.
And culturally, it's a totally different place to be. And I think what's happened then is that's attracted more people to come in because of the culture, because success, and it's not at any cost, but, you know, we don't have a Swiss flag above the office. We're not a charity.
Yeah.
We've got to make a return for all the investment that we make. Would we like to make more? 100%. But success genuinely does breed success.
Yeah.
And wanting to be part of that, I think, is a testament to all of the team that have stuck with it and stayed with it. It's testament to our shareholders who've backed the strategy to be able to do it. And it continues to grow. And now sitting across 80 countries, you know, where we were in 2, is a huge, powerful change.
Yeah.
And I love seeing the happiness on people's faces, celebrating the 90th and seeing 62 nationalities throwing every shape, every genre of music you can think of. That to me was success from a cultural point of view.
Sometimes it's hard to do the right thing. And we sometimes look at the business world and there's this very sort of short-term mentality that we need to extract as much labor out of a workforce, as much productivity out of our employees as we can in a short space of time. And once they've burnt them out, then we can replace them with more talent. Dulsco Group, obviously sustainability, you know, you talked about your involvement in Expo 2020, is obviously going to be a lot at the heart of what you do. But what does that talent piece mean in terms of sustainable success rather than short-term success? That difference between I'm going to make X amount of profit today rather than actually we're going to be here and grow over 4, 5, 10 years. Because sometimes we have this mindset that I don't want to do the hard thing. I want to do the easy thing because that's going to make me money today, as opposed to I'm going to keep my staff on during a coronavirus. What's that sustainable performance piece for you?
Look, I think, you know, we wouldn't have got to 90 without a sustainable business plan, and profits will rise and fall. One hopes they keep growing, but you have to take haircuts.
Yeah.
Either as you invest in people,
that's a bit of a painful, triggering subject, but anyway.
Absolutely, and you know, I think there's a piece around where do you want sustainability to be. It's not just about what we do from a green action point of view, but it's also how do we sustain the business and the model that we have. When you're in a sort of fairly commoditized space, you've got to ensure that your one differentiation is the quality of the product and the people that you have.
Yeah.
And the only way you can do that is to ensure you continually sustain a quality environment for people to operate in. That again helps to attract, because the cost of replacing is obviously 3 to 6x more than what you were doing previously.
Yeah.
And you know, you've got to play the long game. The short game, you know, tactically, yes, you may want to do something, but ensure that everyone understands why you're doing it. No one wants to die efficiently. You know, you've got to be an efficient business, because if you're an efficient business, you've invested in your people, you've invested in what your solution is and what your product is. In the long term, it will make that return. And the biggest thing for me is those people see that and they want to be part of it, which helps sustain your business in the very long term. Having that talent succession is equally as important.
Yeah. And
you're building on what, you know, has been built over a number of years. Management leaders will come and go over a period of time, But if the philosophy all the way through organization, you're deep embedded in your DNA, I am totally convinced that this is what success will continue to thrive.
Is it now, and I'm asking a question that I fundamentally believe in the answer, but is mental health, is well-being now no longer a nice to have? Is it a business fundamental? Is it part of the foundation that you build any business on? Particularly in this part of the region, when we look at the economics of this region over the next 5 to 10 years, compared to the global average, the global forecast, we've got a massive opportunity here. I was talking to a great guest on the podcast the other day, Mazin Gadir, who advises government departments. He said there's a real war on talent because there's so much opportunity for growth, particularly in this region. So is that mental health aspect now fundamental to the the long-term performance of an organization, particularly when you're talking about just talent attraction, but then talent retention?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, the cost of not doing it, I don't think it's been calculated yet, but it's pretty obvious. We've all seen people leave organizations because they've had X more offers from others, and they jump ship, and then they realize the culture's not the same.
Yeah.
The people aren't the same. The short-term gain was a little bit of extra coin, but actually the long-term detrimental issue to oneself is not calculated. So I think it is a must. Whether it's overt is yet to play out. Some people do make a real part of it, and I think the storytelling has to be done, and we've started to do it because when you're going to many countries over the world, different cultures will have a different approach to well-being.
Yeah.
How well-being is positioned. It's traditionally been called welfare. Is it welfare? No, it's actually a fundamental part of you being happiness in the workplace.
Yeah.
And we're not, all holding hands and singing Kumbaya, but what we are doing is ensuring we've got a thriving environment for people to thrive. If you're happy in yourself, you're happy with what you do, you will perform better. If you're not happy with your job, it may have nothing to do with your mental health. It could have everything to do with your job. And therefore, that's a pretty easy decision to take.
But we've seen the figures around that. I mean, we often talk about the Gallup survey, the global state of the workplace. Disengaged employees currently, and I think in the UE, the figure is it's costing businesses potentially up to $4.5 million per hour.
Yeah.
That seems a massive opportunity for organizations just to lean in and go, let's just start mitigating the money that we're losing by not engaging our people.
Absolutely. Look, opportunity cost, cost avoidance, whether it's medical, lost work time.
Yeah.
It's a huge amount of money, especially when you aggregate it with the number of employees. But look at the data that's feeding that to say, why? What is the root cause of all of this? Is it because they've got a bad manager, a leader? They're not clear on the part they play in the organization. Everybody wants to feel valued, whether it's home or at work. And if you understand what you're doing, your job is clear, and you're able to fulfill it, you are going to go home happier. That doesn't mean that 100% of your workforce are going to be rock stars. If you can get 70, 80% of your workforce that are doing a very good job every day.
That's high engagement. Yeah.
Absolutely. 20%, 10% are the rock stars because you don't have enough succession jobs to be able to fulfill their needs. So then you start to lose talent. And 10% will always be churn.
A bit of a left field question, but I've seen this happen quite a lot. Organizations, or within inside a lot of organizations, the only way to better one's financial package is to leave the job you love and assume a leadership position and to move up in the organization. How do we encourage talent to just keep getting better at the thing they do if we don't offer, remuneration as in terms of, you want a skilled craftsman to remain a skilled craftsman, because often you take that skilled craftsman and then promote them to be a leader. Doesn't necessarily make them a good leader. I just wondered about your thoughts on that.
No, I totally agree that, the best, take the world of sales, the best salesperson doesn't always mean to be the greatest sales director.
Yeah.
Because it's usually quite a lonely job. You're usually building your network for yourself and who you work for, but it doesn't mean you'll be the greatest leader. Some people will turn out to be great evangelists, great leaders, and great trainers. And I think there has to be a recognition of where does your skill set lie.
Yeah.
If 70% of a workforce are steady Eddies that do a fantastic job, they earn a decent salary, everybody will always want some more.
Yeah.
We always want to buy, the FX on a forward, it's a higher rate. And actually, can we sustain that? Because, someone buys you at a forward FX and unfortunately you're not living up to what they thought the value was, then there's another conversation. Whereas back in the area where you did a really good job, you were recognized for doing a great job, we've helped to develop you further, perhaps maybe you're happy or you've reached your ceiling.
Yeah.
But there will always be, whatever the number is and percentages that people will want to grow. We've got to help them. And if it's not in this organization, perhaps we try and help them in another organization. But they've also got to be able to understand that if multiple people are saying, you've reached your ceiling, this is a really great job for you and we can give you other areas and develop you further as a person and reward you as being a success, that should be okay for some, but for some it will not be.
It's 2025. I ask you about mental health and what it means to you, and you're able to give me a pretty structured, pretty coherent answer that you believe in. Take me back to 2019 if we can, and just, you talk about struggles and experience, a lived experience. How did that show up for you? What were the signals or signs or the impact either on you, friends, family, business, that say other CEOs, other leaders might go, right, I recognize that. I'm in that space right now.
I think, look, I kept a work mask going for a number of months, as people would.
Yeah.
I think I started to recognize, with the environment of sidebar conversation, whisperings between a very limited number of people. And it challenged the values that I upheld. So I did something about it and, pushed myself forward to people and to say, this is not acceptable. And eventually, over a number of months, I saw it more and more. I found myself withdrawing socially on a number of things that perhaps I would have been. But again, I kept the mask hidden. So I was out there, I'm okay.
Yeah.
Until a point when, to myself, I thought, I need to go and ask somebody about this. So I went into a professional, and emotionally, it cleared out. And she really helped me to go, what's the worst thing that could happen? And I saw her a couple of times not because I thought I was better, but because I thought I'd cleared those decks. And then it culminated in something that moved away from the mental side of stuff to the physical side of stuff, where, my heart went into fibrillation. And as a fit bloke who cycles and gyms pretty every day, that was a bit weird. The great thing was there was nothing wrong with me medically. Every test known to man, the benefit of living in the UAE.
Absolutely,
I was able to have...
You probably had tests that you didn't need, but anyway.
But it was amazing watching your heart operate and all of your veins on a 75-inch television live, and you're thinking, I've looked like I've got aliens inside me. And, it passed because the stress has dissipated. I was incredibly supported by our shareholders. And I said to myself and to my family, this is never going to happen again. Because I'm aware of what I thought I could change and how perhaps I didn't have every tool in the toolbox to be able to do that. And so, I began to talk about it and began to share the experience to help, hopefully, other people avoid it. Because for something that I thought indestructible, I can, do everything I can take on everything, I can change people. Sometimes you can't.
That's exactly the mindset my father had, right up to the point where he died from depression.
Right.
Again, strong, didn't want to admit weakness. Always felt he was in control of everything, but was struggling with depression. Couldn't talk to anybody. Slightly older generation, therapy was just something that he would not have even considered. So, having gone through that experience of talking to someone, we often try to talk to people about the fact that therapy should actually be maintenance and we shouldn't wait till we're in crisis. But there's so much, sometimes reticent or fear, to cross that line and walk through the door of the therapist office. Would you recommend anybody that was struggling to seek that kind of help? Because actually it's just in the end made you a better leader and a better emotional in terms of your health.
wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
I think
quite literally wholeheartedly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there are so many things that, that benefit you, and an awareness of just a professional having that listening ear.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying about receiving.
Yeah.
So I think, like your car, you get it MOT'd, you get it serviced. What do you do for yourself?
Yeah, you don't wait for it to break down.
Absolutely.
Yeah. This is the thing I sometimes wonder about workforces as well, and leaderships. Like, we invest in our people, and if you think you've got 23,000 people, I mean, the financial cost of 23,000 people must be significant. And I won't try and quantify it in money terms, but if you think of, if we invest millions in a piece of technology, we don't run that piece of technology, that piece of machinery 24/7 until it breaks. That's just foolishness.
Yeah.
But somehow in leaderships, in different organizations, we still have that mindset. How do we get beyond the point? In fact, is like, particularly in the knowledge environment that we often operate in. And I know Dulsco, you have your knowledge environment, but you have people out in the field as well. But how do we get to the point where we recognize that actually our people are as vital to the success, if not more so, than the machinery, that we will maintain the machinery, but we won't maintain the people?
Look, I think for us, we've got a lot of large, what I call them, big people assets, that literally, they do things, and they are highly mechanized, and we have to maintain them, as you rightly say. But for the human element, all of us, we need little and often. Yeah. It doesn't have to be one great big thing once a year, as an Olympics or whatever.
Yeah.
Let's do lots of things often. The pleasure that people have in stretching classes, in painting, outside of work. You bring small things together. You get people to, sing, to dance. It's huge relief. Give me a microphone, I'll sing my heart out. I can't sing for nothing. You don't want to hear it, but it's one of those.
Well, I mean, maybe we can test this before the end of the podcast.
Absolutely not.
A musical number to end on.
But it is really, really important that there is small things done often, and I think encouraging people to take part is really, really powerful and strong. And best investments I made during COVID and lockdown, bought a karaoke machine. Outstanding.
Yeah,
outstanding.
I love that. So for leaders listening into the podcast, what would be the advice or the call to action? How do you get started? If you recognize that you can do better, but you're just not sure where to start, how do you get on the road?
I would talk to organizations, like yours of Mentl. I think it's a great way of understanding what's going on in industry. I think as businesses and leaders, we can be a little bit closed shop because we don't want to admit, we might have a problem. Maybe we haven't got a problem, but just maybe we need to talk about things. Yeah. I think genuinely, the more you'll fish, the more you'll find. Yeah. And there is a lot more awareness of people's ability to do a great job if they've got the right platform to be able to do it, if they can open up with some of the challenges they have. And it's not an easy pull.
We're going to say it's quite courageous to actually, as an organization, look in the mirror. That's a difficult first step sometimes, isn't it? But how necessary is that for the long-term sustainability and performance of an organization?
100%. And, I was in a lavatory of a very large organization a few weeks ago, and it was ADNOC. And on every mirror, I was blown away. And I said, you are the face of integrity. So you're looking at a mirror and you see that etched on the mirror. Yeah. And I just thought that's really powerful. So if you want to get certain messages over, there are very smart ways of doing it, which are subliminal. Yeah. And how you take that in is really, really important. But also having the conversations with other people. It is not about
just having the conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. And don't be afraid to share some things. It is not going to show weakness. In my view, it actually shows strength and empathy with your colleagues, with your peers, with your workforce, with, certainly with your family. You've got to be able to do this because it makes you a stronger leader. I'll go toe to toe with anybody, but I also know when to walk away and back off and go, thanks for that, Scott. Really appreciate you giving me that detailed feedback. I'll take that on board and kill the conversation. Yeah. It's just a skill set.
Okay. I'm going to maybe cause you to blush just because I want to focus on the fact that Well, I mean, congratulations to Dulsco Group. You got highly commended in I think it was the ESG category, wasn't it? But also your team nominated you for the leadership category at the Mentl Awards, and we called you on stage as the winner. You looked like you were genuinely shocked to have received that award. But what did that mean, perhaps to you, but also what did it mean to your organisation to receive that recognition from an independent panel of judges? And the judges in the Mentl Awards are tough. So even to be a finalist is a great thing. But what did it mean to you to receive that award from a panel of judges who had a real good look at what you guys were doing in Dulsco?
You were quite correct. I was very shocked. I was extremely humbled.
I've never seen you lost for words.
Yeah, no, genuinely, and you've got that right. I was. It was a real brilliant surprise, and a great honour from my colleagues. They're not my team; we are a team, and for them to put me forward for such an award, because there are lots of things around the region that you can go in for awards, and this award is different because it's a different award, and that's as far as I need to say. Genuinely delighted, and it meant something that I find quite natural is really recognised, and therefore it's had an impact on people because they've done something about it. They weren't encouraged, they weren't invited. They just got off their backsides and said, we want to support this, and we want to support him and what he's doing. To the wider team, they felt good because they put something forward and they won. Everyone likes to be successful.
Yeah.
But what it's recognised is, as an organisation, that actually we've been recognised because it starts, it's crass to say, it starts at the top.
Yeah.
And it's fed all the way through.
Yeah.
And, it's all very well having a committee in an organisation that's trying to force it up to the top. This is coming from the top. And whilst I'm, as I call myself, the current group leader, wing commander, then, it will stay that way. And I hope it will. And I have no doubt that the owners of this, 90-year-old legacy business will keep it that way.
That feels like a mic drop moment. David Stockton, CEO of Dulsco Group, thank you very much for joining us on the Mental Space podcast today. If you've enjoyed this podcast as much as I have, please remember to subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, I say it a million times, the button's right there. It takes you literally a split second to hit, but it helps us bring guests like David onto the podcast. So please subscribe, share, and enjoy. David, one last time, thank you very much for joining us on the Mental Space, and also congratulations for your success.
Thank you, Scott.
Awards 2025.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.